Hello and welcome. James Halstead is a UK-based manufacturer and distributor of commercial flooring products. They offer high-quality vinyl flooring solutions under their flagship brand Polyflor, plus they are the company behind 12 other well-known brands in the commercial flooring market. The company was formed in 1915 and went public in 1948, where it has gained considerable kudos for having raised its investor dividend for 49 consecutive years. Now, I attended the 2023 AGM as Mark's proxy, and in the podcast that followed, I did remark on how quickly the event lasted. Anyway, this year, both Mark and I went to the 2025 AGM, and there was what I can only describe as an interesting turn of events. To hear Mark's updated review of the company and to find out what happened at the AGM, stay tuned to this, episode 43 of The Desert Island Investor. This episode of the podcast is generously hosted by Progressive Equity Research. Visit their website at progressive-research.com. Mark, you are once again in Mauritius, and there is something of a Mauritius rumour flying around about your plans for the future, which we will be talking about later in this episode. But the stock we are covering today is James Halstead, ticker symbol JHD. Now, this is a stock that we last discussed in December 2023, but this year, your attendance at the Halstead AGM appears to have been the catalyst for a largely welcomed change in the way that their AGM is conducted. Anyway, we'll get on to that in a minute, but first, as usual, those base numbers, please, Mark.
Right, James Halstead has a market cap of 569 million, a PE of 14.1, a yield of 6.5%, and that's based on the current share price of £1.36.75.
And have there been any notable dealings portfolio-wise?
Yeah, I added in September 2024 at £1.7745, and again quite recently in November 2025 at nearly £1.40. And earlier that month, Gordon Oliver, CEO, through a PCA, which is a person closely associated, purchased 8,500 shares. And David Drillingcourt, CFO, also through a PCA, purchased 21,293. And that was at a price of £1.35.5. So director buys are worthy of note. It presently sits at number 12 out of 31 stocks in the portfolio, and its portfolio size is 3%.
Okay, any particular reason for you adding?
A mixture of looking across the portfolio for where I thought there was value, and together with some other buys, partly to dilute the exposure I had to my very largest holdings. Presently, I think my portfolio it's in better shape, if not in total wealth, then in wealth spread.
Now, you say you'd like this one because it's a quintessential desert island stock. Why is that?
It's like the Mississippi, Old Man River. It just keeps rolling along, just doing more of the same. It has an annual report of just 86 pages, which is very consumable. And when you're managing a portfolio of any breadth, in my case, 31 holdings, having several that are low maintenance helps the cause. And as I've said before, I want the portfolio to serve me and not the other way around.
Now, testimony to its long track record, James Halstead boasts 49 years of successive dividend increases.
Yeah, that is some record. That goes back to when I was at primary school. I had a brother who hadn't even started school back then. So I don't know about you, Paul. Were you expecting your first grandchild?
No, most definitely not. Now, I took it upon myself to do some research. The dividend in 2000, which is the furthest I could go back, was 11.75 pence. But in 2025, it was only 8.8 pence. So surely the dividend has actually gone down.
Well, elementary, my dear Kerin. Halstead have had a number of what they call share splits over the years, and since 2000, I think there have been four. February 2006, January 2011, January 2013, and January 2022. And I think these were all 2-for-1s, and they may have there may have been additional shares issued for other reasons during that period. But you are indeed correct. The dividend in 2000 was 11.75 pence, but that was to only, and I say only, 30,999,695 shares in issue. And today it's ballooned to 416,786,000 and a few more, and those shares are at 8.8p. So there's quite a bit of calculating that needs to go on to equate what that is in old money. And if you're not aware, it can be confusing. And these are all things that being a long-term holder help you understand, with the backstory.
Okay, share splits. We may have covered those previously, but why are they used?
They're generally used when the share becomes a big number and it's thought that it deters investors and liquidity. Berkshire Hathaway, Buffett's Berkshire Hathaway, it's never had a split and trades at around $725,000 for one share. So many investors can't afford a single share, which limits their investor base. Now, the stimulus for this podcast is that we both attended the Halstead AGM. It's 110th, and that was last month at Bolton's football stadium. I think it's called the Tough Sheet now. Now, I generally attend AGMs accompanied by Elaine, so seeing you by my side, I hope people weren't thinking, she's really let herself go recently.
Oh, thanks.
I thought we looked good together. But I must admit, it was a nice touch when you opened the back door of the limo for me to get out, and you were wearing shades and an earpiece and talking into your hand mic. The asset is approaching the stadium from the south entrance. No visible threats. Just hopefully we can stretch to a couple of motorcycle outriders next time for added effect. I'm sure you'd take a bullet for me. So I had attended one Halstead AGM previously, several years ago, but I'm generally in Mauritius this time of year. But you kindly attended as my proxy last year, and I think you were surprised about the protocol. And although you're not an investor, Paul, you do offer a fresh pair of eyes, which is valuable. You've not been indoctrinated. How did the two AGMs differ?
Well, as you will recall, at that previous event, I was indeed surprised at just how short the official dealings of the AGM lasted. I didn't intend to time it as such, but I glanced at my watch when they began talking, and again when they formally concluded, at which point waiters entered the room carrying trays of wine, and it lasted just 10 minutes. Anyway, this time I did make a point of timing it, and it lasted just 7.5 minutes, or at least it would have done had some annoying person not stood up and requested the opportunity to ask some questions. And I think our listeners can guess who that was. There was a veiled grumbling around the room, and I imagined a group of waiters with trays doing a quick 180 back into the kitchen and trying not to spill anything. Now, I knew in advance that Mark was unhappy about the Halstead board preferring to talk to investors in private at their AGM. And I agree with him that all questions should really be asked and answered in public. And that enables all shareholders to hear the answer, not just one who's been chatting with a director at the bar. However, when Mark stood up, I was reminded of a wedding where the vicar asks, if anyone has any reason why these two people should not be married, speak now, and somebody actually says yes. However, once he'd taken the lead, several other people asked questions too, and I got the impression that the break in tradition was generally welcomed. It only knocked the drinks and buffet back by about half an hour, so it wasn't really a big deal.
Well, thanks for that review, Paul. All AGMs have a slightly different flavour. Like I said, the one I attended was to that same non-interactive format, but I was not expecting it, and I was caught a little bit on the hop. The layout was that the board were sat at the top table, and the shareholders were not in serried ranks, but at circular tables like you'd have at a sportsman's dinner or a wedding. There was hospitality laid on. And this had more of a feel of a social gathering with an AGM tagged on rather than an AGM with accompanying refreshments.
So, I mean, are you disapproving of catering being laid on at AGMs? I mean, I know you're conscious of your stock companies spending every penny.
No, I think it's a nice touch, and it's irrelevant in the big scheme of things. We were local, but lots of people travel from far and wide, and some stay overnight at some expense. So it's the least you can do, really, is to lay something on. With some, it's a buffet, others coffee and biscuits. You went as my guest, so I primed you to expect some lunch, and perhaps there was no need for a hearty breakfast. But I did feel somewhat, well, embarrassed when you started filling those Tupperware boxes to take things home, Paul. It was well attended as far as AGMs go, and I would guess 100 and 120. Not all were shareholders. Do you think I'd be in the kind right early with that, Paul?
Yeah, that seems about right. I believe it was the chair's first year.
Yes, Mark Halstead's first as the chair, and it probably threw him a little when I stood up and addressed the board as this was not in the script. And my first question was about asking questions, but my follow-up question was about the ample cash, which is was at 68.4 million. And Mark deferred this to the CFO, who gave it a thorough answer. He could have sought to wrap it up, but asked if there were any other questions, and I could have looked a little isolated and it could have gone a bit flat, but what followed was a bit of an I'm Spartacus moment where shareholders started springing up and saying, I have a question and I have a question. So this was pleasing, and I think it was an endorsement. Now, I'd just like to make an important point. The very next person to follow me was a gentleman called Stuart Forshaw. Well, who? Well, if you look at his CV, he's held various positions. Henry Cutt Lumsden, he was Director of Research, Charterhouse Securities, ING Bearings, Senior Research Analyst, Tilney Investment Management, Director, Headley Stockbrokers, Investment Consultant, WH Ireland Equity Research Analyst, and James Sharp Investment Research Consultant. Now, when you look at credentials like that, I think it's fair to say that when it comes to equities, Stuart knows a thing or two. Hopefully, at an AGM, you find that there's lots of talent, some on the top table, but within the shareholders, there's also a lot of knowledge, and they ask salient, relevant questions, probe, and make suggestions. And they are a valuable resource, a resource that the board, if they have any sense, can tap into, and at the very least, learn which issues are important to them. Stuart was not an isolated case. He introduced me to Adam Ball, and I was chatting to Roger Hoyle, and these are knowledgeable private investors, not people just sheltering out of the cold. And beyond that, a number of people came up. Apologies if I cannot remember every name, but out of every conversation, I was able to take something away. Everybody in that room knew something I did not. And again, the questions raised were good quality. And in fairness to the board, and I always want to be fair, they answered the questions respectfully and thoroughly, and they didn't give any fudged answers.
Okay. Well, you have said to me before that it is nice to socialise, and I could tell by the way you were hitting the sandwiches. But for you, the AGM is a working event, isn't it?
I'm there first and foremost to learn and hope in some way this can influence my investing decisions. Scraps of information garnered can make all the difference. And I've gone to the cost and effort of attending. I may as well max the day out.
Now, following the end of the questions, I thought it was very nice that several people came up and thanked you on encouraging the board to receive questions as a collective. But in short order, one of the non-execs, Mike Halstead, also came up to our table and pulled up a chair. Now, what did he have to say?
Well, it suggested to me that shareholders have been somewhat disgruntled or dissatisfied and perhaps suffering in silence, as we Brits politely and often wrongly do. It's bred into us from being at school to be supplicant to teacher at the front and then to the boss when we start work. And here, shareholders often accept the terms of engagement. They're told without a quibble. It's a fait accompli as the person at the front, the chair, elevated on the stage with microphone, flanked by the top brass, looking like a combat unit. They look down on the shareholders, literally. So then, as you say, Michael Halstead, or Mike, as he called himself, joined us. And Mike is, I think, fourth generation Halstead, but he has a CV that includes Saatchi and Saatchi. And I always thought you missed out there, or they missed out on your talents, Paul, your marketing talents.
They did. They were very foolish.
Yeah, but you're still out there. You're still available. But he runs his own company, HH&S, which is a subscriptions business. So a little shout out for them. However, they may wish to update the Halstead website, as it just calls it H&S, not HH&S. Anyway, he's also the beneficial holder of 1,454,434 shares. And that's as per the annual report. So he's got skin in the game. So he first opened up by saying that the reason for the AGM format stems back, to, I think, to his great-grandfather, who always wanted the AGM over in 5 minutes. However, he said that following the developments of the AGM, the board had quickly convened a quick discussion amongst themselves and decided that in future AGMs, they would welcome questions from the floor. So I would call that a result, and every credit to the board for identifying the needs and wishes of shareholders and changing course so quickly, having smelt the wind. And a little revolution. Perhaps I'll have to start wearing a beret like Che Guevara, Che Atkinson, perhaps. All it takes is one person to challenge the status quo, and this need not be in an aggressive manner, because Christianity started with one man. But, again, I'm not sure if this would have occurred if I'd have been a lone figure. But, others did follow my lead. Don't worry, Paul, I'm not getting in a gold complex. You won't find me.
Yes, you are. You've now likened yourself to Che Guevara and Christ.
Yeah, well, okay, all right. Perhaps it's going to my head a little bit. But no, I won't be giving a sermon and saying things to other investors like, bring me your lame portfolios for I shall heal them, especially after my recent performance. But anyway, what followed with Mike was a very convivial conversation which developed into his hobbies, including sailing and, interestingly, shooting. I didn't take the latter to be a veiled threat, despite him having access to a firearm. So perhaps not blood on the carpet, but blood on the Polyflor.
I think if you delay the buffet next year, there will be a definite risk. We are going to need some security. Right, let's return to this 49-year of unbroken dividend increases. It very much defines the business with many shareholders. And in recent history, it has been going up boldly or at a snail's pace. Is that, overstretching them?
Conveniently, in the report, Halstead detailed the last 10 years of accounts, and this takes into account any share splits and special dividends. So, worthy to note, Halstead have had a history of specials in addition to that 49-year record. And in 2016, the earnings per share were 8.5p and the dividend 6p, which gives a dividend cover of 1.4. Now, since then, the earnings per share CAGR has been 1.48% and the dividend CAGR 4.35. Now, the dividend growth has been growing ahead of earnings per share. So naturally, the dividend cover has narrowed to just 1.1. But there is that comfort of the cash buffer. So if that growth trajectory continues, it'll be becoming increasingly difficult to squeeze that orange further. They can grow the business. They may try a share buyback as a trick to enhance the earnings per share number. They may start eroding that cash buffer, or they may decide that dividend record has to come to a halt. When we spoke to Mike, he said that they were in no way obsessed about the dividend. And later I spoke to Mark, the executive chairman, and I thanked him for receiving our questions and had a quick chat. Now, Mark has a beneficial interest in some 26,523,406 shares worth in excess of 36 million. So Mark has also skin in the game, a couple of limbs and perhaps a torso. But Mark's salary was 558,000, and this compares with the dividend income by my calculation of 2.3 million. So that's where he's getting the lion's share from. But on page 24 of the report, it shows that the performance bonuses of 578,000 were paid to the executive chairman and CEO and 100,000 to the FD. The salaries were found way back on page 54. Now, I would like to see all salaries, bonuses, fees, pocket money on one page in totality as a convenient and easy read across. So that was on page 24, basic salary and bonus payments, which I've just given you. So then if we go to another it's 30 pages back, it's under profit of the parent company. So I read this out. The company has taken advantage of the provisions of Section 408 of the Companies Act 2006 and elected not to present its own profit and loss account. The profit after taxation of the financial year dealt with in the financial statements of the company was $37,141,000. The aggregate amount of directors' emoluments, excluding pension contributions, was $2,729,000, of which the highest paid directors' emoluments were $1,149,000. The directors' salaries and fees for the year ended 30th of June 2025 were J. A. Wild, $20,000, Mr. M. Halstead, $558,000, Mr. G. R. Oliver, $546,000, Mr. D. W. Drillingcourt, $257,000, and then it gives some more directors. So my point is, why are the directors' salaries listed under profit of the parent company? That's the headline, and not separately under this is what your directors are paid. And possibly that's not to unduly draw attention to how much they're actually pulling out the business. Now, I will let you decide on that. Anyway, back on point. When I spoke to Mark, we talked about him being the new chair, and he said there is indeed an element of pressure in maintaining that long-running dividend story that he's inherited. So it's a slightly different narrative to what Mark said about not being obsessed.
There were a couple of questions about the share price.
The CEO commented that there are many factors affecting the share price, which I agree with. I'm quite relaxed about the share price. I've patient money with no need to liquidate holdings. In fact, I quite like it when shares are trading at what I believe to be below their intrinsic value, as this gives me a chance to buy at what I consider an advantageous price. As I said recently, I topped up on Halstead, and I had lined up another of my holdings for a top up, as I thought it was in a sweet spot, but then it had run away from me. The timings of my accrued dividends landing don't always occur in my best interests, and this is what probably makes it such an interesting sport. It's the unpredictability, and chess has set moves, and investing is full of random moves.
Okay, so Halstead is AIM listed, and seeing you got the ball rolling, someone asked a question relating to this.
Yeah, AIM as a collective has been performing poorly, and there was a question if they would consider a full listing on the LSE that may lead to a re-rating, and the answer was an unequivocal no, and that was very reassuring. There are some advantages to AIM. There's IHT benefits, however, the appeal has been limited by Rachel Reeves limiting this by 20%. And unlike on the main listings, on the LSE, there's no 0.5% stamp duty, and it all helps the cause. When you think about it, being taxed for buying part of a business, it's incredible. But Halstead are one of the larger businesses on AIM, and with AIM-focused funds, if they're facing redemptions, they often turn to the larger businesses with liquidity. And I would suggest this is another reason that's not helped the share price, and that's totally out of the control of the directors.
Now, the board was asked where growth will come from, and the CEO commented that a lot of sales are from the UK, but the world is a big place. Now, you've said you're increasingly looking for UK-listed businesses with exposure outside of the UK, due to it being an austere and hostile environment for business. So what's the geographical split?
The UK is 42.6%, Euro and Scandinavia 35%, Australia and Asia 11.4%, and the rest of the world 10.9%.
And how has that UK exposure changed over time?
The oldest annual report on the Halstead website is 2004, and I could go back further, but that is a decent length of time. It's over 20 years. But Then the UK was 47.1%, so not much variation. As a salesman, my trade, I know managers always want extra business, but at the same time, you also have to defend what you've already got.
Now, each year, Halstead trot out some of their end users. Can you share some of those emerging markets you talked about?
Well, Halstead touch on various countries across the world, established and emerging. I've extracted a couple of paragraphs. It says, our Radcliffe produced flooring has been installed in countries across Africa, where examples such as the new, and I don't know why I always have to try and read these out, Paul, Onanjokwe State Hospital in Namibia and the Hospital dos Chamados de Luanda, Angola. It says they showcase our long history in healthcare. Now, I keep identifying Africa for potential, Paul. It also goes on, our Teesside produced flooring has been fitted in the Star of the Seas, the largest cruise ship ever. In Manatee, Puerto Rico, we have supplied Bristol Myers Squibb with further products for their 33-acre manufacturing facility producing medicines. Within the UK, the installations are as diverse as the Millwall Football Club, recently renovated hospitality number 11 lounge, and NCR Dundee, which is famous for its ATM business, and the recent major refurbishment of Butlins Bognor Regis. I don't know if you've ever been there, Paul.
I've been to Butlins. I think it was Minehead when I went to.
I've been to a couple. I've been to Pathelli. I once came third in the Bonnie Baby competition, Paul.
Yeah, times have changed, Mark. Standards have gone up.
Okay. So it goes on. Our flooring has been installed in Cyprus, Lithuania, Singapore, Indonesia, that country again. I keep mentioning Indonesia. The list is very extensive, from high-tech manufacturing facilities to children's play areas. Now, against that, to the more developed markets, the climate for our German and Central European business remains highly competitive and activity subdued. Overall revenue declined 7% in like-for-like currency. The core German sales held up well, with Germany being by far the largest country serviced by Object Floor, but we're 3.2% down year on year, with the French market facing the brunt of sales decline just over 20%. The French economy remains weak, with the government deficit being amongst the highest in the developed world, and they are struggling to bring down public spending. That sounds familiar. With this backdrop, the general sentiment from the public is to either save cash or prioritise holidays over major renovations. Distributors are reporting revenue down 15 to 20%, which inevitably is leading to price discounting. And with independents struggling, there has been an element of consolidation in the market. We are mindful of the potential impact on credit and are increasingly vigilant. So, Europe, turgid, regulations, red tape, burned by legislation. The emerging markets, in my humble opinion, are less fettered and hindered. And I think that's going to be the future.
Now, Halstead is a manufacturer, and manufacturing has been in long-term decline in the UK, not helped by a number of reasons. You have previously cited net zero as being one of them, and in their report, Halstead have a pop at the national grid.
Yeah, we should be straining every sinew to help our manufacturers. Once they go, and very seldom do they return. And we cannot employ everybody in a call centre or a warehouse. From the report, it says plans for the new production at our Teesside facility continue to be frustrated by the deficiencies in the ageing national grid infrastructure in the area. Notwithstanding these difficulties, the year saw the completion of our upgrade to fume extraction and product curing that has improved efficiency, reduced energy use, and increased throughput. And on energy costs, it says plant efficiency and manufacturing output are crucial to the performance of our business, and more so to the overall group performance. With overheads such as energy continuing to exceed those of our international competitors, Radcliffe and Teesside production lines have continued to seek process improvements and increase machine utilisation to reduce the cost per unit of output. We in the UK, we've got to be more creative than others. They have, these other countries have a built-in advantage before they start, energy costs. Plus we've got labour costs. Again, the employer NI, minimum wage will have an impact on differentials. Businesses will therefore have to look increasingly to automate and reduce the headcount.
Well, hopefully what James Halstead have taken away from the AGM is that as they are a successful business with an impressive track record, and the AGM is something to showcase their achievements, the questions raised were widely constructive, and they weren't aggressive or accusational. I mean, they have good answers to those questions that were asked, don't they?
Very much so.
Now, okay, so thank you very much for that review. Kind of looking forward to the next AGM, just to see how many people are throwing things at you when you try to get in.
I think some people were actually keen to get to the bar, weren't they? And I think there was we took some valuable drinking time, I'm sure.
Yeah, there was some grumbling there, I tell you. But ultimately, as I said, it's an AGM. It's as well as being a sort of opportunity to say thank you to shareholders. So anyway, to round up, you are currently in Mauritius, and I believe you have some news about that.
Well, I've just been granted residency status, so I've soft plans to move in the next 12 months ahead of the 2027 tax year. And what really has given me the kick I needed was Rachel Reeves, who I've been banging on about, bringing my pension pot within inheritance tax and reducing the inheritance tax break on the AIM stocks and other things that have been brought in not affecting me. But we seem to be bringing in tax after tax and increasing tax. And I'm looking what we're getting for our money, and it's less and less. And I've just thought, enough is enough. And the winters are long in the UK, and they're restrictive for many of the activities that I enjoy. So I intend to just dip my toe in the water and see if I can find better value elsewhere in a more positive environment. And I at least want to try and not left with regrets and what ifs. And I'll still be allowed back into the UK for 90 days, which is going to still be a big part of my plans, and I'll not be liable for UK tax. And on this theme, we're going to be joined soon by a very special castaway who will be discussing all things expat for those that are leaving for foreign fields or indeed returning to the UK. So please tune into that. Okay,
thank you very much indeed for that update, and thank you very much for your review of James Halstead and the James Halstead AGM. Well, that's all for this episode. We hope that you enjoyed it. Please remember the content is for information only and it is not financial advice. If you have a question for Mark for our Question in a Bottle podcast, just complete the form on our website, thedesertislandinvestor.co.uk. Thanks again for listening. See you next time.